too small, I got big dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pun Fun, where we have fun with the puns. My name is Ryan, and today we have an exclusive interview with Francois VIgneault. So, hey Francois.
Hey, how are you, Ryan?
Great. I mean, spring is, well, pretty much here.
Spring is starting to sprung.
Exactly. Which, I mean, it comes full circle. I was reading your first book, and it's funny. Like, there's this flower that's unpotted but doesn't need the dirt and so on. It actually has legs and runs around. So I thought it was a great opportunity to say, hey, let's tie this all together. So if you're not familiar with Francois, he is an illustrator. He's also a cartoonist, also a designer. He's also worked on Orcs in Space, so Volume 1, which is already out. You also have Volume 2, which is coming out, well, actually it should be out, if not in a couple days, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have...
I think just in a couple days after filming.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also have Volume 3 coming out in fall, or beginning of fall, October-ish, if all goes well. I mean, with everything going on, with the world, who knows? But we're hoping and fingers crossed that everything goes smoothly as planned. So, Francois VIgneault, is this your actual name, or is this a alias that you use as an artist?
That's my actual name, yeah. I actually use my mother's last name, but I've been using my mother's last name for so long that it's also my legal name and everything like that. So that's I run my whole life under that one.
All right, cool. And without giving us your age, or giving us a number rather, can you give us an event or historical moment that would indicate your age?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that the thing that got me into comics in the first place was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and specifically the Archie comic book series.
The Adventures.
Exactly. TMNT Adventures. So I think if you can imagine that was my entree into the world of comics.
Right.
That got me really into the comic book shop and everything. You can probably pinpoint my age pretty closely.
That's awesome. Were you able to ever read the books before?
What do you mean? Oh, the Eastman
OG
Laird books?
prints, yeah.
I read them after that. So basically, like, the cartoon got me into the TMNT Adventures, which got me into the Eastman and Laird books, which then opened up a whole category of independent comics for me as well.
That is so cool. And especially, like, Eastman actually did a cover for Orcs in Space. So, I mean, that must have been so cool to have such a collaboration. So how many years would you say you've been drawing?
I mean, I've been drawing since then, or even earlier. I think most kids draw when they're little. Almost everybody draws.
Right.
And I think that it's just that some people never stop drawing. And I think I'm in that category of people. I never stopped drawing. I always enjoyed doing it with different ups and downs. And professionally, as my job, as my career, I've been doing it full time for the last 7-8 years or so.
Okay.
And then before that, I was always doing like little mini comics or zines or my own designs and illustrations and things like that, kind of dabbling all over the place.
Very cool. And so what would you say was your catalyst that made you change it from a hobby to a career?
I got a couple of freelance gigs that kind of came out of the blue that were pretty good little gigs to do illustrations for magazines, to do a comic for a startup company that kind of wanted to present something in a sort of a fun way. So they wanted to do it in a comic way. And at that same time, I was sort of feeling like I wanted to have a change of career. I had been doing all kinds of different stuff, and I really liked all the jobs and stuff that I had done before. But right previous to this, I was a creative director at a little notebook company, and I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, there were some limitations on it, and also it's just a tough job. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I want to do something that's just a little bit different. And so I was like, okay, well, why don't I I'll take this opportunity to just dive into doing drawings, doing as much freelance work as I can, design work, and work on my graphic novel Titan that I had started, but it had really stalled out for a long time.
Okay. Wow.
And so I just kept on rolling with that, and then I was lucky enough to just have various little things kind of keep popping up.
Wow.
Of course, you got to chase down each one, right? Like,
oh, no, absolutely. It's not like Goldblum says, like life will find a way. It's really, you got to find your way through everything.
Exactly.
And you said, so you mentioned TMNT, so Eastman, of course. Is there other comic book influences that helped you, or that you took inspiration from?
Oh, I mean, sort of almost infinite, right? Like, because I've read a lot, and
So you're really deep into comic books. Like, it's not just.
I'm pretty deep into comics, and I grew up reading them, and then I've worked in various other elements of the comic book trade and the publishing trade and things like that, like as an editor and as a translator, working in a comic book store.
Wow. Okay.
As a graphic designer. So I've
cool.
kind of like had my finger in a lot of different pies, and definitely there's so many comic book artists who have had like just a tremendous impact on me.
Wow.
One who I think has had perhaps the biggest impact just visually on the series that I'm doing now, Orcs in Space, is Stan Sakai, who did Usagi Yojimbo.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see some of the influence. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't read him as much anymore, but he's still great, and he still is producing like.
He's still making
awesome
comics,
work.
which is crazy.
Yeah, the same comic. He keeps hitting his mark. I don't read it as much anymore, but when I was a teenager, I thought that those were really amazing, and they really taught me a lot about like the presentation of action on a page and everything like that.
Cool.
But there's so many others that have been influential on me that you may not see as much on the page. Like I wrote my thesis on Jaime Hernandez, who did Locus through Love and Rockets, and so he said, I've gone through his work a ton, and he's a big influence on me too, all over the place, kind of.
Okay, so that's amazing. So you've taken, or you've grasped a little bit of this, a little bit of that along the way. But yeah, I can definitely see that influence, especially, well, one, through your designs of your characters, but also even the backgrounds too. Sometimes it's very not chaotic, but in the sense that there's a lot going on, and then there's some scenes or some panels that is super simple. It's just the character. It's like you give the reader a break as well, which they have well done as well. So well done.
Good.
So through that, so talking about your influences now through the art process, how do you get started? Like, if to start one of your, for example, any of your characters, or even coming up with a character, where is it that your process starts? So is it, I know some people say, oh, it's the chest and the head, and then you put it on pen to paper, but how do you get that? There's a lot of evoked emotion, by the way, in his comics. So I'm going to put up a few images. You're going to see that it's very expressive. So how do you translate that from your mind to the page?
Sure. Well, I mean, all of the characters in this particular series, they started out with the idea of the character from the writers, right? Like the writers were like, okay, we have Gore, we have Monktar, we have Kravis, and they had a certain idea, but they had no visual concept really of them too much, so they were like, Gore has a mohawk and Kravis is small and Monktar is big, but that's like the full, that was the I might be glossing over some of the details, but that's basically what the concept was. And so then I had to like kind of run with it from there. But my design process is usually pretty fast. With the main orcs, I did do like special drawings of them, like a full character drawing to say, okay, because that was right at the beginning of the process. And also the artists and the editor were kind of getting to know me and to know like how it works. And so I was like, okay, well, this is what they're going to look like. And does this work? And it mostly worked right off the bat. They had some edits, like I remember I didn't understand their script, so I drew Monktar, who's like the big dude in the comic, but I drew him big but small. Like I made him like really really short, like a little ball kind of, and they were like, no, this doesn't work with all of our ideas. And I was like, okay, I get what you're saying.
So there really was a request for scale then.
Yeah, exactly. And then later on, now that the guys know me better, that I know the world better, most of the time I've designed most of the characters right on the page now as I'm drawing, right? So if I know that there has to be a giant robot that's the size of a planet, which is somebody who shows up in volume 2, I just start drawing it on the page, and I just
Right.
start, kind of trying to connect the dots and make it all
And building
work out.
around that.
Exactly. And I'm not super, I love character design, but I'm not like super particular about every little element. I don't do those like turnarounds that, like a lot of really good artists do with their like animation style turnarounds where you see the character from all the different sides.
Right.
I'm usually just like, I just go for it. I'm just moving forward, and then I'll adapt everything I do from that point on based on drawings that I've done previously, if that makes sense.
I see. All right, so always building off of the previous panel until because I know sometimes there's like breaks also in your pages. So like you'll have like sometimes it's a full on page or a half a page where it's like kind of it's not, it doesn't bring much to the story. It's just like, again, a break for the reader, and then when you go on to the next page, it's another you're off on another tangent, if you will, on the story.
Right. Well, a lot of times the scripts that the guys are writing, they're really dense. There's like a lot of
Right.
jokes, there's a lot of different things happening on every page, and so part of the challenge and part of the fun of working on it is just squeezing everything into the book,
Right.
just making it all fit. And I'm lucky in that the guys really trust me, and they trust me to kind of reorder and move things around so that we can get to the spirit of what they want, like the
Right.
fun of what they want. But sometimes when it's being translated into the comic book page, things are better served by being moved around, and hopefully it all flows well together. We'll see.
Okay. And for Orcs in Space, so when I first saw it, it did have a bit of a lot of space-oriented cartoons. A lot of people are referencing it, for example, to Rick and Morty, because of the way it's colorful and it jumps and it's vibrant. So in this case, reading through it, I mean, Rick and Morty is its own thing. This is really its own thing too. So it really is its own adventure. It's full of jokes, full of puns, it was the delight from beginning to end. It does have a fast pace. So reading it, you go through it not quickly, but like it really gets you engaged in reading the whole thing quite promptly. But there's so much elements, as you've mentioned, that you do have to go back and do have to like go into deeper details. So you do have to actually bring the book closer to you, because in the backgrounds or in the front, there are like, hidden details into, like, for example, now that you mention your, profound love for TMNT, or like how you got into it. Now I would think that is it Donna, Dona, the AI? So it's the eye, obviously. Would that be based off the Technodrome's eye as well? Is there stuff like that is, hidden Easter eggs or stuff that you've put into to show like your, love for the comic book world?
Right. And I mean, there's so much in there. That one, I've had a couple people ask that, and I totally see it. Like a couple people have mentioned that Fugitoid is a character, I think, that
Right,
Eastman and Laird created and stuff like that. And I think that it's probably, most of it is probably not conscious design choices,
Right.
but also just sometimes it's getting to that kind of like, what I like, which is like a sweet spot between like the simplicity of the design, where the design, you can read it and understand it very quickly, but then I'll try and like put in like little detailing, like there's like detailing on the side of Donna's head that is meant to be evocative or suggest technology, or even the way like that she and some other robotic characters, they have like that sort of like tubular, very simple tubular Dr. Octopus kind of arm with a little hand at the end of it. And I think that is so, I think that those all, they link up sort of with each other, even if they're not intentional. It's just that we're all, I've read it all, I've read all that stuff. It all has like steeped into my brain. And that's why I try and be upfront about the fact that I'm like, I'm definitely influenced by so many different things that have come before, because I think it's all there on the page, and oftentimes I'm surprised by it myself. Somebody will mention something to me, and I'll be like, right, I forgot that the Fugitoid was a thing, but that is cool. It totally works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and it's great. Like I said, it gives the reader, like, because right now the huge thing about Easter eggs, everybody's trying to link everything to something else, and so reading it, you do see these nods and homages to stuff that we've grew up with. So I mean, that makes the reading all the more fun, because now you're like reading it, but at the same time now you're hunting for those elements while you go through the book, which is fun. And for your art process, going back to it, when do you know that you've like, this is enough, like what you've drawn or what you've put down is perfect, or perfect enough to say that you can continue on to something new?
Right. I mean, it's like that famous saying, like, a work of art is never finished; it's only abandoned. Right.
Right.
And it really oftentimes it's just a matter of like you just have to move forward and move on to the next page. Especially
Right.
with something like Orcs in Space, which there have been some stops and starts, and we had some delays because of COVID. But essentially, it's a monthly comic book. It comes out on a monthly schedule, so that really sets a pretty defined deadline and timeline for me to like work on my pages. I can't work on a page for 10 hours or 12 hours or something like that, because
No, for sure.
it won't work out. I won't be able to finish them in time. And so the other thing that you mentioned earlier, you were talking about how like sometimes there'll be a lot of detail in the background, and then there'll be a panel that's more simple. I often try and use that sort of rhythm in my drawing with the comic as a whole, where I put details in the places that I think they'll have the most impact or the most interest for the reader.
Like the nightclub at some point was just insane.
Exactly.
It's like a Where's Waldo?
Yeah. I remember when I was drawing that particular scene in the nightclub, I think it's like there's something like 105 characters in the background or something like that. And so you draw that, but then like the next the next page, you're going to kind of pull back and go a little bit more simple, or sometimes the next scene or something like that. So I always try and like put some detail in, give something to the reader, so that when they go back to read it, they they can spend a little extra time on it, get a little bit of extra humor, hopefully a little bit more of a sense of the world. And then I balance that out with more simple panels, so that not only are they easier to draw and faster to draw often, not always, but they also hopefully serve the story. So the story goes from like more detail, less detail, but more impact, more detail. So it changes the rate that the audience reads the book, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, it's much appreciated the way that the flow goes, because we've had, I've also been, deep into comic books for a long time as well. And sometimes there is that kind of disconnect where sometimes there's not enough, where it's just like, empty panels or empty, but too much of it. And sometimes it's just way overloaded. So you kind of like, you'll read it and you're kind of like, okay, what just happened? However, this runs very smoothly in the sense that it gets you geared up, it gets you going. There's a lot going on, and at a point there's a time of comms. You kind of get time to recollect what's going on. So well done on
Cool.
It's not something that everyone has like down, and I can tell you that for a fact. Like reading through these, I know some people just collect them, but if you actually read the comics, there's a big part of that experience. It's not just about the art and the reading, it's also about the experience itself. And I did have a great experience with these comics. Well, for the first, and I've been fortunate to read some of the partial of the second one, which is, you guys definitely want to hit that one. It's such a, if you've enjoyed the first one, you're definitely gonna love the second one, and there's a lot of callbacks to it, so very fun.
Cool.
For the concept, so I know you said there was the writers and a group of writers, so I mentioned it before. How did the orcs, getting into space, because like the orcs, reading it like on my behalf, I can feel that they're kind of related to Earth in the sense that they know everything's kind of, the way they talk, the way the mannerisms, I guess that's also to be relatable. But even like they're talking about the plant being in dirt and smelling nice, and so I was like, okay, so their planet, what they've been from, is probably ours, or did we mutate to the orcs? Anyways, is there kind of those kind of distinctions that you've put in for yourself and also for the reader as well, or is that like something that maybe I'm looking way into?
No. Well, I think you're getting at something interesting, and I like your deep thought theory about like the origins of the orcs. I'm gonna pass this video on to the writers, and so they're gonna listen in on that.
Right.
And I do think that that's actually kind of an interesting it is sort of interesting that the series like literally doesn't have any humans in it, right? Like there's never a person like a human being in this series, and it's sort of like weirdly liberating in a way because everyone is on their own path. And you mentioned like sometimes the rendering of the characters will be different or something like that. And you know, some of that has to do with just me learning the pace of the drawings. Like I definitely started the book with a heavier, thicker illustrative line just in general. And I've been pulling back because I like that, like a big heavy
outline
line. I think it's like there's something exciting and vibrant. I think I went a little too heavy with the beginning of the book, and I've been pulling back from that. But another thing is sometimes will be in the way that I like treat the surfaces or treat the costumes of the different characters in different situations, because like for instance like the orcs, they're like dirty kind of, right? Like, they're like these dirty barbarian guys,
like gladiators.
I'll like textures and stuff on them. Or another thing like that is weirdly it was like weirdly important to me is that they have freckles. Like all the orcs have like these dots all over their bodies.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
And and that I have to do, like I do a whole like separate pass of like just putting these little dots all over their bodies, separate and apart from any color that the colorist DJ Chavis gets on there, just because I like that texture and I like that it sets them apart. So I am often trying to like, even though it's all drawn in a very cartoony style, I'll try and like add a little bit of something just to indicate like that the characters are coming from different worlds, different cultures or something like that. Like the orcs are coming from a different universe than everybody else. And so I want them to look like a fish out of water most of the time. And I try not to draw anyone else who looks the same. Like, so like in that, you know, it be it the Starbleep characters who are like in their uniforms, or the
with the three fingers,
the two fingers, or the club people at the party. Like I try and make it so everyone looks more fancy, more put together in some ways than the orcs, or even like the space rats, right? Who could have easily been like dirty, evil little rats, but instead, working with the writers, they instead turned into this kind of like fancy rat look, right?
Yeah,
and
like a posh rat. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To keep it so that they don't replicate that look of the orcs, who have like that more D&D wild child look. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, very, very cool. I mean, the fact that going through it, you can actually distinguish these and very, very, again, love the comic book. For a lot of these type of, I would say right now, like for example with Netflix and you know all these, everything kind of rolling into, you know, series, and I'm not gonna go maybe mentioning Netflix was too on the nose there, but do you think this would or may come into the animation world? Because I can definitely see this being something like a thing for sure.
Yeah, I totally think it could be. You know, it all depends on, there's so many different factors that go into that. But definitely, you know, and this is a good moment too to mention my collaborators on it, because I'm the artist for it. I draw it, but there's also like a really great team of other people who are working on it. And then prominent among those is Justin Roiland, who's the co-creator of Rick and Morty. And so that's right there in the DNA of the book. And then two of the other writers, Rashad and Abed Gaith, they both are coming out of Los Angeles, and like Abed is a screenwriter, but he also works as like a voice actor. So I know that animation is definitely on their minds. And then the writer Michael Tanner is also connected with that world in some ways too. And so with all those like different bona fides going into there, I think that there's a lot of opportunity that this could get turned into a show, and I think it would be really fun. I think it's like the fun thing about it is that it's sort of an engine for adventures and stories, right?
Right.
Sort of like in the original Star Trek. I think that was like one of the things that helped Star Trek get off the ground, is that basically every episode you can visit a new planet and you have a new adventure, and then you can reset to the status quo or a variant of the status quo. It's very similar kind of situation in Orcs in Space. You can have a different adventure in every volume, in every season. Hopefully things are changing and growing as you go along. Yeah. So, I mean, I would love it. Of course, that would be great. Will it happen? Who knows? It depends on so many things. Like, it depends on the success of the comic. It depends on whether or not people in the in the Hollywood, like, or Burbank, think that it would be a good fit. But I think it could be really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Orcs are coming back. I mean, the whole Lord of the Rings series and all that. I can definitely see this popping back in. And space, you can never go wrong with space. I mean,
yeah, well, that's something I really like about this series is that I think that I love that the title itself is its own elevator pitch, right? You're like, okay, picture Orcs, but in space, and you're like, okay, yeah, I got it, and that's the whole series. That like, that's the good thing. So I think it could work.
That is awesome. So for your art, on the style wise, how would you say, or what would you say is your specialty in this case?
Okay. Well, I think that in some ways, I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades with style wise, which I think is a little bit shown off. Like, if you were to compare this series, Orcs in Space, that I'm working on now, compared to my graphic novel that came out in 2020, Titan, which came out from the same publisher, and no pun intended, they're both science fiction things, but they're light years away from each other in style, like they're
right.
Or maybe I should have said pun intended, because this is you.
We're
like
all about puns. It's encouraged. It's evoked even. No, it's awesome.
Well, they're in different universes as far as like the visual style that goes into it, and I think that that's part of how I try and approach the project. Is I'm trying to approach the project. Of course, I have like my natural way that I draw, and like kind of like the natural features that I do, but like Orcs in Space is way more cartoony, is way more tapping into that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Usagi Yojimbo, even Justin Roiland kind of vibe, versus something like Titan, which is much more on like the Jaime Hernandez, the Michel Robagliati, that kind of a feel. Right. And the way I often consider it is that I think of myself as an artist, oftentimes as like the director of the movie, right? of the book, right? Like, of the book, right. Whether or not I'm writing it myself or somebody else is doing it, I'm the director, and so that means I have to cast the book, I have to design all the sets, I have to design the costumes, I have to quote unquote shoot the film, do the lighting and the look, like that. Exactly, and I tend to think of myself as like a director that has quote unquote director that has a kind of hopefully a varied style, where I hope it's still recognizable, but it changes quite a bit from project to project, because I think that the stories so often demand a variety of styles, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can definitely see that, and it's definitely evoked again through the book as well. For anybody who has read either volume 1 or is going to pick up volume 2, is there something from the director's side that we should be looking at or paying attention to reading it? Is there something that, let's say you were to throw out a word, for example, in particular, that kind of gives us a more in-depth or a new view of what we're reading?
I think that you put your finger really well on something that I would encourage people reading Orcs in Space to do, is just to read it and read it quickly, because it does read really fun and have fun with it. But I think it does benefit from a second or third run through, because I really tried, because I want to give the audience their money's worth, and so I try and put a lot of details in the background, and there's I try and put lots of micro world building details. I'll try and put in little visual jokes, verbal puns, kind of in the background, because they're not important to the storyline, but I think that there can sometimes be just some fun little nuggets in the background there. And it's rarely I rarely do a traditional Easter egg where I'm like, oh, here's Captain America is in the background or something like that. But I do try and do a lot of things where you might look at the background and you can almost imagine hopefully you can almost imagine the story that's happening with another character. I spent that nightclub scene you talked about. I spent a lot of time putting in different little details of the characters in the background, and my goal was that theoretically, if we kept on doing the series, I could pull characters back from that that nightclub scene, and they could appear later or something along those lines.
That's very cool. Wow, that's really 2 steps ahead. That's very cool. So for any aspiring artists or anybody who's actually in the field that's looking for that little tidbit of information, what would you say is your words of wisdom? So what is Vigneault's words of wisdom?
Wow. I don't know if they're wise at all. I'll try and come up with something. I would say, there's so many different levels to it. I would say that go in with low expectations would be one thing. Like I myself, definitely, I had like a normal day job, all kinds of different day jobs my whole life, and I worked in stores and I worked in companies, and I always try to keep like a toe in the creative field because I was inspired by design and comics and things like that.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily think like, oh, I've got to draw comic books for a living, or even I have to draw illustrations, or even I have to be creative for a living. I did all kinds of other stuff. After 20 years of doing other things with my time, 15, 20 years of doing other things that were really satisfying and fulfilling, I happened to have gotten the chance to go back to my original dream, which is, when I was 12, 13 years old, I wanted to draw comics for a living. And now that's what I do. And so it's a total surprise. And I would say that it's a tough business, right? Like it's a really tough business to break into. There's so many talented people. So I would say don't get too frustrated that if it doesn't go exactly according to plan. And if you can, keep doing what you do because you love to do it and you enjoy doing it. I never stopped doing like little comics, little drawings, publishing my own mini comics, journaling, all kinds of like creative things, just to keep that part of my brain going. But I didn't necessarily have the impression that they were going to turn into a job. And then the other thing I would say is be aware that it also might turn around and not work for you at any given time. It might work or not work. You could get a great opportunity. Like I've been really lucky. I've gotten some really good opportunities. At any moment, that could also change, right? And I always try and remind myself of that too. Like, will I still be drawing comic books for a living in 5 more years? I have no idea.
That's true.
Would I like to? It would be great. Would it be the end of the world if that didn't work and I was doing something else with my life? No, it wouldn't, because you can just take your energy and your creativity and move it into all kinds of different stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Just be flexible and have be flexible and be humble and have low expectations.
And I think you're touching on so many points that like it's a not a common ground, but like people have come on the show have really mentioned that like it's okay to be okay, but like there's gonna be time where you will have to you will get that time to shine, if that opportunity shows itself, but it's not running after it per se. It's really like building yourself up, and if it was meant to happen, someone will notice what it is you're doing. So absolutely great words of wisdom. So you were talking about future projects 5 years down the road, so maybe we're not going to get into 5 years, but what is it that you have lined up for yourself as future projects?
Sure. Well, I'm wrapping up volume 3 of Orcs in Space right now. I'm about halfway done drawing that, and that'll come out in October.
Okay. And then, so it isn't official. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's nearly finished. It'll be done pretty soon. And then after that, I have a couple projects lined up. I'm working on my next graphic novel that I will write and draw myself. Wow. That one's going to be called Blue Moon. That's the title for now, and it is sort of similar to my book Titan. It's sort of a more serious science fiction book that like looks at contemporary issues and problems, but with the lens of the near future.
Right.
I think that's going to be kind of interesting. I'm excited about that. I have some visual ideas for that I think are going to be really cool. And then I'm also hopefully going to be starting work on, in French, volume 2 of 13e Avenue, 13th Avenue, which is a book that I did volume 1 a couple years ago with the author Genevieve Peterson. And hopefully we're going to be working on volume 2. I'm looking forward to that because the volume 1 ended up on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So I'm looking forward to finishing that up.
Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. And usually we tie this up with a pun. So do you have a particular pun you'd like to throw out before we close things up?
I do like puns, but I always find them hard to interject into everyday language. But I'll tell you one that's not one of mine. It's like a little anecdote where someone told a pun that I just was really amazed.
Go ahead.
So I was in a meeting, and the manager, she was great. She was a great manager, a good friend of mine, and she had created some sort of presentation, and she used some clip art that she thought would work, but it really didn't work at all with the context of the presentation that she was making. And one of my colleagues, she said, "Oh, you really put the clip art before the horse." And I thought that was really great. I was like, wow, that's a one of a kind, like 1 in a million chance that you can use that particular pun. It only works once. I've been looking for a chance to quote my friend's pun, but I never had a chance. So I always was like, wow, she's such a genius to be able to pull that off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wonder if that was something that she had tucked away just in case.
I don't think so. It
just rolled out.
Sharp. She was just sharp, and she saw this opportunity to combine clip art and horse and have it be aesthetically perfect. So that's one of the ones that I've always thought was one of the best.
There you go. So if you've enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. We also suggest that you can also hit that subscribe button. This way you stay on top when we have future artists coming on our show. Also, hopefully when book 2 comes out, or even book 3, we can have you back on the show. Maybe more to talk about project-oriented stuff rather than the full-on interview. And we'd be more than happy to promote it here. So thank you again for coming on. I mean, this was a blast, and we're super excited to read the full, issue, volume 2. And yeah, I mean, I definitely hope that volume 3 comes out in time, because yeah, 2 for in the same year, can't go wrong.
Thank you so much for having me on, Ryan. It was a real pleasure, and keep up the good work. And
thank you.
I'll see you around. You're going to be you're here in Montreal, right? Are you going to be at the Comic Art Festival in May?
I probably will. I know we're going to Toronto for the Toronto show. We'll be doing Montreal, but yeah, I can definitely swing by. And yeah.
Cool. Maybe I'll see you there. And
cool.
there's, I'll just throw out like a little plug for the Montreal Comic Arts Festival, which is coming up at the last weekend in May, and I think it's the last weekend in May. Super great show here for anyone who's local, like you and I, to Montreal, with tons of amazing comic book artists and work both in French and English. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be the first year in person in 3 years. And I think it's going to be a real breath of fresh air for us all. Yeah,
absolutely. Before you guys go, we also have a big contest for you. So this one's definitely a whopper. You get a set of 7 books altogether. So this is actually volume 1 and part of volume 2. And this is courtesy of Francois himself. So it's going to be crazy. I mean, like I said, this one's a big one. We definitely, to enter, you basically need to put in the comments below. So it's very simple. What did you enjoy about this interview? Obviously, you need to be subscribed to the channel. And yeah, I mean, that's huge. Thank you again. And Team Pun Fun, you definitely want to get on this. Crazy opportunity. And I mean, it's I think one of the easiest contests to get into. So don't want to miss out. Thank you again, Francois, for being on the show. Take it easy, guys. Peace.
Bye.